joined via Zoom by the Director of Fundraising from Rise Up Against Gender-Based Violence. That's Mandisa Khanyile. Mandisa, very good afternoon to you. Thank you so very much for being with us. No doubt you've been paying attention to the sentencing of Alutha Pasile just before we came to you now. Firstly, let's start with your reaction of the sentencing. It's 25 years for the murder, 10 years for defeating the ends of justice. They're both to run concurrently. Do you think that this was an appropriate sentence? You know, as I was listening to the judge talking about this murder, I thought this would be a life sentence. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Sentencing is a tricky game. Especially for perpetrators that are young like this one, because 35 years is still going to be alive and might actually exit the prison system. And I don't think a person of this nature has any right to return to society after chopping up a woman, after killing her, and then putting her in a suitcase because he saw it on some crime channel and he thought that it was the most effective way to get rid of her body. Look, I'm at the point where I really don't have vested hope in the criminal justice system. Yes, perpetrators do get caught. Perpetrators do serve time. They end up out on parole. They end up reoffending. I think we need to find new ways or change the current ways that we actually do correctional services. I do think that there needs to be a more enhanced program that directly speaks to rehabilitating offenders, especially when they are most likely to return, and some kind of watch list process where communities are informed about offenders that re-enter their communities, so that they can also be kind of like watchdogs within their community to ensure that things don't take place. So that's kind of my view on it. I hope that the family is comfortable with the sentence. I hope that they are healing from their tremendous grief. And it's just such a tragedy that we lost a young woman this way.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, it was interesting that the judge was speaking about the imposition of harsh sentences that might indeed help in stopping others from committing similar crimes. I mean, what's your view on that? We've certainly seen harsh sentences being imposed before, but it doesn't seem like it's helping in this fight against gender-based violence and murders of women in this way.
In order for you to get a harsh sentence, your case needs to go to court. You need to be caught, and there needs to be proper policing. So, I mean, you know how many, for example, sexual offences cases enter a police station and how many of them even see the inside of a courtroom. Yeah. Harsher sentencing works if you have an efficient system that is actually catching criminals. How many men are currently out on bail and have gone missing? How many cases get dropped by prosecutors? So for us to even talk about sentencing, we have to have a society that actually believes that we have an efficient criminal justice system that will work for them. And perpetrators currently right now feel that they can get away with their crimes. And so harsh sentences are great on those one or two occasions when we actually see people actually meting out, people actually getting justice. But the vast majority of cases don't ever see the inside of a courtroom. Yeah. Especially sexual offences. There's so many bodies that have not been found. There's so many women who don't report. So yes, harsher sentences are great, and I applaud the magistrates and the judges for doing what they're supposed to do. But the reality is that the general public needs to believe that they'll even see the inside of a police station, that they'll have handcuffs, that they'll be arrested, and that currently isn't the case.
You know, Mandisa, whenever I talk to organizations like yours that are, you know, trying to fight gender-based violence, one of the questions I always want to ask, in your view on it, is, you know, what the root cause is of gender-based violence. And, you know, just the other day I was speaking to another organization, and not in my name, and I asked, it seems as though these crimes are getting more and more gruesome as we go along. It seems as though we get affected by one and then we move on, then another one comes and it's even more gruesome than the last. And then today I heard the judge talking about the role of the father, and I suppose this is something that his legal team had put forward as a mitigating circumstance. The fact that he didn't have an active father, the father was abusive, the father was emotionally and financially abusive towards his mother. And we will sit back and say that that's those are just excuses. But I wonder, is that an important thing to factor in? I mean, there are many men who were brought up or in homes where there was abuse, where fathers were abusive, but they didn't grow up to be people who chop up women and discard of them like this. But it certainly was interesting that this was indeed raised in court and used as a mitigating factor. And I wonder what your views are on that, and on the fact that something like that is indeed seen as important enough to raise as a mitigating factor.
In a country where fatherlessness is so rife, and we have so many young children that are growing up without fathers, I really don't think that we could, how can I put it, try give that as a pass for violent behavior. Yeah. Of course, there's many root causes. One, I believe, is the lack of adequate psychosocial support. And not just the lack of adequate psychosocial support, but the fact that it's not really encouraged, especially amongst men, especially amongst boy children. We are not having enough conversations about men and boys speaking out when they are hurt, crying when they need to cry, letting out their emotions and being able to find healthy ways to heal when they have been hurt. Girl children and women are given tools in order to deal with that. I need to say Zimbogodo, right? So we are given tools from a very young age on how to manage emotions, how to deal with emotions, allowed to have outbursts, allowed to express ourselves, allowed to cry freely. And we still, even with the understanding of what toxic masculinity is and understanding patriarchy and all of these terms, we're still raising boy children to be strong, to not express, to not show feeling. And that bottles up and manifests itself in them trying to show power in these very violent and non-constructive ways. Yeah. I mean, you can see this from a toddler all the way up to an adult. What does a toddler do when they don't know how to express their emotions? They act out violently. And unfortunately, this is happening in adult males because they never got the tools to learn how to manage and to express emotion. And so when they get into relationship power dynamics and they feel hurt or they feel unheard, the only way that they can act out is through violence. So adequate psychosocial support, yes. Encouraging actual conversations and the right conversations, yes. But the third thing that I think is important is that other than the mass trauma that we've experienced as a country that we haven't really begun to grapple with and process, I think we also need to start having, I know I'm a broken record on this, but proper comprehensive behavioral change programs that start at community level and that penetrate all sectors of society. We can't really see a proper change in the cycle of violence if we don't start having the proper conversations in the communities, in the spaces where people meet, in the churches, in the taverns.
In fact, Mandisa, that's where I wanted to go, and I wonder if this is possible. I mean, is there a way to enforce this within the school system? I mean, it was interesting to hear that Alutha Pasile is not, is not somebody who's not educated. This is someone who's got qualifications. This is someone who has been obviously through the schooling system, not just, high school, primary school, but we're talking, even after that, tertiary education. So he's reached that level of education. So we're not even talking about this being at a level of education. Surely there's a way to involve perhaps the education sector to bring, you talk about these programs and it would be lovely to have, but I'm just trying to figure out how, in what sense and how we would have or enforce those sort of programs. And is there a way perhaps for organizations like yours to talk to, the education sector, to talk to the Department of Basic Education in terms of having those sort of programs where boys can learn from a young age how to react, when they're angry.
I mean, to my understanding, that is what things like the LO curriculum are supposed to do. What is life orientation if it doesn't give you tools to manage how to cope? Coping mechanisms, strategies, understanding anger management, all of these things. And also over and above that, right? So I agree, one, LO needs to change within the schooling system, maybe have courses within the tertiary space as well. Sorry. But another thing that we can also do, which I think would be really effective, is on first instance, so for example, in a domestic violence situation, that we have some kind of mandatory anger management program that is imposed on perpetrators.
Yeah.
So without a judgment, etc. When someone has been accused of a domestic violence instance, that the state actually puts them in a facility where they have to attend some kind of mandatory anger management training. Because seeing people reoffend consistently doesn't make sense when there are tools and organizations and methods that can actually change that behavior. So I agree with you completely. Introducing it into the LO curriculum, having a program specifically at university level, but also over and above that, once an offender has actually offended, that we have some kind of rehabilitation process, some kind of healing process, some kind of anger management training, and that this is consistent throughout. So that people, at least when they are perpetrating, can't say that they're perpetrating because they didn't have skills, they weren't taught well, their daddies didn't love them enough. We actually have given them the tools.
Yeah, Mandisa, thank you so very much for your input. We appreciate it greatly, and let's continue with these conversations. And hopefully, not only when something like this has happened. Hopefully, we can continue with these conversations and build the society that we want to live in. Thanks for the work that you're doing, and certainly for weighing in on this topic this afternoon. That's Mandisa Khanyile, who's the Director of Fundraising from Rise Up Against Gender-Based Violence. And of course, our conversation on the back of Alutha Pasile being sentenced today for the murder of student Nosicelo Mtebeni, 25 years for the murder that he's been sentenced then this afternoon, and 10 years for defeating the ends of justice.